It's Saturday, July 30th, and it's actually the second day of the lunar month, which of August. But August hasn't started yet, but the lunar month of August has started. And I am of the persuasion that we need to have the month match up with the lunar month. So why can't we just match the month of the calendar with the month of the lunar month? Why can't today be the 2nd of August and yesterday was the 1st of August? Why is today July 30th if the lunar month has already started? In other words, the calendar month is based on a lunar month. But because they had trouble determining the lunar months, sometimes you couldn't see the moon, but that's not the case anymore, okay? That's not the case anymore. So let's just match the lunar month with the calendar month. Can we do that? That's not why I made this video. But that is my suggestion, is that we need to match the lunar month with the calendar month. And it's generally religious organizations that do that, although governmental organizations do that too. But in the old days, the government was the religion. So, do I need to form a government or a religion in order to make the calendar match up with the lunar month? I don't know. Whichever one I need to do, that's the one I'm going to do. So, I wanted to make a video because I've been debating a lot of Muslims. And I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. But Muslims all have the same false information about the Bible, about religion, about Christianity. And, why did Islam come into existence? Why did Christianity come into existence? Why did the religion of the Israelites come into existence? Why did the Jewish religion come into existence, which is separate from Christianity? Those are all good questions, and I frankly think that that people are entitled to know and understand these answers. And let's just take an example here. My suggestion is that Muslims invented a fake Jesus story. Muslims invented a fake Jesus story. Why? Well, first of all, if you compare the story of Jesus in the Quran to this Jesus in the Gospels, you will see it's not the same story, right? The story has changed. What do Muslims tend to argue against Christianity? They tend to argue against Christianity that Paul corrupted the story of Jesus, or the Paul corrupted the Bible. The Bible's been corrupted. And when they say the Bible's been corrupted, I think they mean Paul. I think they mean Paul. Most of the Muslims I've encountered don't know that we have the Bible that was written in Greek in 300 BC by the Jews at Alexandria, Egypt, for Ptolemy. So they don't realize that we actually have the original translation from the Jews themselves into Greek, and that the Jews spoke Greek from 300 BC through the time of Christ. Most people don't know that. And so most people think, and I used to believe and search, I was like, well, where's the original Aramaic? Where's the original Aramaic? Where's the original Hebrew Bible? It doesn't exist. There is no original Hebrew Bible. Why? The reason is because the Jews wrote the Bible in Greek for Ptolemy, and that's the Bible that survived. Because the Jews also spoke Greek, and when they were in Judea, they were speaking Greek in Judea, and they were writing in Greek, and they were using Greek, just like everybody uses English today. So they started using Greek instead of their original Aramaic and Yehudit language. I call it Yehudit because the word Hebrew is actually a misnomer. It's an incorrect use of the term. And Jews today call their language Hebrew. But that's not the correct language. That's not the correct name for the language. If you read 2 Kings, I'm not sure which verse it is, but in 2 Kings, is it 2 Kings? Yeah, when the Assyrians come to Judea and they're speaking to the Hebrews or the Judeans in in the language called Yehudit. That's what it's called in that book. It's mistranslated as Hebrew. If you look at the original translation, the quote is, and I'm not quoting it exactly, you'll have to find it. I don't remember exactly which chapter and verse it is in 2 Kings. But the general thing is, it's the story about the Assyrians are coming down to Judah, to Jerusalem, I believe, and they're saying, you need to surrender, and we'll make a deal with you. And the guys go out and see him, and they say, hey, don't speak to us in Yehudit. Speak to us in Aramaean, because we understand it. And we don't want the guys on the wall to hear our conversation. So what the word is in that passage is Yehudit. I don't know the chapter and verse, sorry. But the word that's used is Yehudit, meaning the language of the Jews, which is slightly different than the language of Aramaean. Because the guys on the wall, they spoke Yehudit. But they didn't necessarily understand Aramaic. So Aramaic and Yehudit are two different languages. In the King James Version, it's translated as Hebrew. Don't speak to us in Hebrew, speak to us in Aramaic, because we understand it. Well, the original translation is Yehudit. Yehudit. So there was a language called Yehudit. That language appears to be lost. I don't know. When the Jews, and I don't know if it is or not actually, but when the Jews around 400 BC, I'm sorry, 400 AD, when the Jews started to split off from the Roman Empire, and they wanted to recreate their language, they used Aramaic as the basis of the quote-unquote Hebrew language. They called it Hebrew, and they used the Aramaic alphabet. Now, the Aramaic alphabet certainly was the same alphabet used by the Hebrews, or the Yehudi, the Jews, the Yehudi. Let's call them the Yehudi. But the fact of the matter is, the Yehudi had a different language. They had a different language. And I believe that's because that language was native to Judea. And of course, where did Abraham and Isaac and Jacob go to get their wives? They went to Aram. Aram. Because they were Arameans. So they went to Aram. They didn't marry with the Canaanites. They went to Aram. So now that's of course a story, but it's an important part of the story because it shows that the Jews were not necessarily racially the same as the Arameans. They had a different language. And under the kingdom of Israel, they were the main tribe of the kingdom of Israel because they're the ones that exported the religion to the other people, I believe. Because if you look at where the religion came from, it came out of Egypt and out of Midian, that territory, the Sinai, and up in, so it spread from the south up into the north to the Aramean people up there, right? So that tells you that the religion actually began in the south, which with the Israelites in Egypt. Didn't start anywhere else. I mean, it could have started with Abraham saying that there's a creative force behind nature. Okay, probably more of a scientific view. But there's no religion of the Israelites until Egypt with Moses. That's when that religion started, because Abraham didn't have a religion really. And everything we know about his religion, we know from the 5 books of Moses, which came out of Egypt. And we're not written until after at least 1200 BC, more likely after 1000 BC. And we know that because Genesis tells us that Abraham sojourned or stayed with or spent time in the land of the Philistines. It says that in Genesis. Well, the Philistines weren't in Canaan until 1100 BC, and they didn't have a permanent base in Canaan until after 1100 BC. So closer to 1000 BC, that's when the Philistines had a permanent residence in Canaan. which they took from the Egyptians down in the southern portion of Canaan. So, we're talking about Muslims. Muslims think that so the Muslims invented a fake Jesus story. Why? Because Paul invented a story of Jesus that the Muslims couldn't accept. So rather than saying your story is false, let's go find out what the original Bible says, they just invented a fake Jesus story and all the prophets of Islam are just fake versions invented by Arabs. Because they think that the whole Bible was corrupted. Now, the Bible hasn't been corrupted, actually. And I used to believe that the Bible had been corrupted. The fact of the matter, the Bible is in pretty much the exact same state that it was originally in. It has always been translated exactly, word for word, for the most part. There's very, very slight differences between the Ethiopian translation and the Greek translation and the Samaritan translation, and they're almost identical. They're almost identical. But yet many of us have had this idea that there must have been some corruption of this book, like this book must have been corrupted. Well, it kind of was, because it was originally pagan. So if you want to go back and say, well, the Muslims say, oh, the Bible was corrupted. Well, okay, because the original was pagan. The original book was called Enuma Elish. That's the original Genesis. That's a pagan story with pagan gods. You know what I mean? So, yes, it was corrupted from paganism into monotheism. But once it was once we got the monotheistic version, it's been translated very carefully and very accurately. So we do have the original Israelite book. We have the original Israelite books, the 5 books of Moses, and the stories of the kingdom of Israel. Those are the original Israelite books, the writings of the prophets. Now, Isaiah, for instance, not all the chapters in Isaiah were written by Isaiah. Some of them were written later and called Isaiah. But those are still all original. They're all original. They haven't been corrupted. They have not been corrupted. I used to believe that the Bible was corrupted because I was thinking, well, if there's one God and this one God and he created everything and he must have had a pure message and then man corrupted it. That is not what happened. That is not what happened. There was a pagan religion, and the Jews came along and said, we're only going to worship one God, the King of the gods, and he's going to be our God, the God of the people of Israel. And he's ours. He belongs to us. He loves us more than everybody else, and that's our religion. Now, why did they start that religion? Because when they were in Egypt, they were not Egyptians, but they were in Egypt. And at one time, their people were the rulers of northern Egypt as pharaohs for 400 years. They had 4 pharaohs, I believe it was 4, who were kings of northern Egypt. Or Egypt was split into 3 parts: the northern kingdom, the middle kingdom, and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom was the black Africans. The middle kingdom was actually the original Egyptian line, the racial Egyptians. The true royal line was in the middle. And then in the north was the Semitic line, which was the Amorites. And they were known as the Hyksos people. And they ruled northern Egypt. And when Yamos came to power in 1550, he purged the Hyksos from power. But they were purged from power, but that race still lived in northern Egypt. They were subjects now of the king of Egypt. And he was the king of all Egypt. He was the king of the whole Egyptian empire. He took everything back. The royal bloodline of Egypt had enough, and they finally mustered enough power to take back the south, and to take back the north, and to take back Canaan, and they took it all back. That was in 1550 BC, and that's when the Semites lost control of northern Egypt and Canaan in 1550 BC. And then in the north, in Syria and in Babylon, you had the Aryans, known as the Hurrians, Mitanni, the Hittites, coming down and displacing the dynasties that ruled, the Semitic dynasties that ruled Syria and Mesopotamia as Babylon. Hammurabi means the father of the Amorites. Hammurabi. Hammurabi, father of the Amorites. So those Semitic people were displaced, and they had less and less and less and less territory until they were just kind of roaming around in Canaan. And they were also living in Egypt. I'm sorry, they were living in northern Egypt, but now they were under the Egyptian rule of the true royal line of Egypt, Amos. So they started their own religion. Why? Because the people close to power in Egypt, they hated this group of people. They hated the Semites because they were not Egyptians, but they were Egyptian pharaohs at one time. And the people, the true bloodline of Egypt said, that's wrong. You're not pharaohs. You don't control Egypt. We do. But these people still had power. Why? Because they still had a population in northern Egypt, and that population was still part of the Egyptian Empire, and so they had political influence, and they were still involved in the royal courts of Egypt. So it was several hundred years later, around 1200 BC, that the Egyptian royal bloodlines eventually started to kill these people that were involved in their courts. Not the people that were the population that was inhabiting the Delta region, but the people involved in the political power of Egypt started to be assassinated by the Egyptian royal bloodlines. They had them killed. And it was at this time that you get the story of Moses. And Moses means born of. It's not a Hebrew word, it's an Egyptian word. Moses means born of. And the Egyptian pharaohs had titles. Born of Thoth means Thothmosis, born of Thoth. Ramosis, born of Ra. Amosis, born of Ah, the moon. So Moses means born of, but there's no Egyptian god before the name because he rejects the gods of Egypt. You see? He started his own new religion for his people. The people that were being rejected by the Egyptian royal families. They rejected them. So they said, we need our own religion. So they formed their own religion. And they used some of the Egyptian, because they were part of the Egyptian religion before that. And so they took some of the books of the Egyptian religion and some of the books of their race, which were Enuma Elish, the creation story of Enuma Elish, and the myth of Adapa. The myth of Adapa. Okay, that's the story of the food of immortality that now you find in the story of Adam and Eve and eating the fruit of the tree of immortality and the fruit of the tree of good and evil, or good knowledge of good and evil. Well, that comes from the myth of Adapa. The myth of Adapa is the original. They're not exactly the same, but it's the earlier story that the later story is evolved from. So when you're reading Genesis, it was originally a pagan story, and it's a story about the Anunnaki gods. Enlil was the king of the gods. That's why he appears in the garden at the breezy time of the day, translated in the King James Version as the cool time of the day. The breezy time of the day, because Enlil is the god of the wind. And he's the god of, and wind is breath. It's the breath of God, you see? And the breath of God gives the creation Adam life. See, it's the breath. The spirit is associated with breath, which is associated with Enlil. Enlil. And that's where you get the word il, which is where you get the word el, which is where you get also the word Baal and the word Allah. It's from Enlil, Ilu, the wind. So anyway, but that doesn't mean they're worshiping the wind god anymore. They started their own religion. And they made stories about God, but they did not depict God as an idol. That was the core point, which they probably got from the Egyptian occultists. I believe that that's an Egyptian occultist idea, is that God has no image. And yes, there's imagery all over Egypt of gods. The god of this, the god of that, the god of this. But the secret cult knows that God has no form. It's the general people that believe God has a form. The secret cult knows God has no form. So this secret cult of God has no form became the religion of the Israelites. They squirreled it away. You know, like a squirrel gets food in his mouth and he goes and hides it somewhere. They squirreled it away from Egypt, and they started their own religion. And this is now the religion of the Israelites. And this is the religion that comes out of Egypt through Sinai and through Midian and into Canaan. And so now of course they called the god now they called the god Yahoo. The Jews do. The people in the Aramaeans in the north called it El. But it doesn't matter what you call it. It's just that's who the God is. It's the formless, the invisible God. The invisible God, the creator God. And he's the God of all. So he's the creator God, he's the God of the wind, he's the God of the lightning, he's the God of the rain, he's the God of everything. He's the creator of the universe. And he has a people. Why? Because in ancient times, people created their religion. It was the religion of the Greeks. The Greeks had their own religion. The Romans had their own religion. The Egyptians had their own religion. The Canaanites had a religion. The Sumerians had a religion. The Babylonians had a religion. Well, now the Jews have a religion. The Israelites have a religion. So it's the religion of the Jews. It's the religion of the Israelites. And of course, they're the chosen people because it's their religion. So now when you're not an Israelite and you want to adopt this religion, it's actually not your religion. It'd be like Africans adopting Greek religion. You can, but why not just call them Greek? Why not just have, what's the African name for the sun god? What's the African name for Venus? You know what I mean? See, that's how they did it in the old days. In the old days, whether you're in Greek or Canaan or Rome or Samaria, wherever you were, or in the Hittites or wherever you were, you all had the same gods, but you had different names and different stories for them. So the Jews had their own God, the creator God, the king of the gods. They only had one, though. That was their thing. They had one God, and they were loyal to this one God, and they were the people of that particular God. Because in the old days, people had a religion. So a race had a religion. So that's why Judaism is a race and a religion. Just like the Greek religion, well, it was the religion of a race of people. And the Canaanite religion was a religion of a race of people. So, it was not the religion of the Muslims. None of the Israelite prophets prophesied for Muslims. Only Israel. Because they were Israelite prophets. So they were prophesying for Israel. Moses made laws for Israel. Isaiah made prophecies for Israel. Jeremiah made prophecies for Israel. Elijah made prophecies for Israel. Because they were Israelites. So this idea that Muhammad was the prophet of all mankind, this is actually not the original religion. So there's no way it could be the original religion. Because there is no all mankind religion in the old days. So the original religion was that it's for this particular race. They're the ones that made the religion. It's for them. And the prophecies of the religion are for them. It's not for anybody else. Isaiah didn't make prophecies for the Greeks. He made prophecies for Israel. He didn't make prophecies for the Assyrians. He made prophecies for Israel. He said, Israel, if you don't turn away from evil and follow God, you will be destroyed. So now that's a universal idea, though. You could say the same thing to the Greeks. If I could say to the Greeks or the Germans or the English or the Americans, hey, if you don't turn away from evil and follow God, you will be destroyed. That's true. That's true. So there is a truth there that applies to everybody, okay? But the religion that was saying these things in the Bible was the religion of the Israelites. It wasn't the religion for anybody else. Isaiah didn't say to the Assyrians, hey, if you don't turn back to God, God's going to destroy you. No, he didn't say that. He wasn't concerned with the Assyrians. None of the prophets were concerned with anyone other than the Israelites. They wanted all their enemies dead. They wanted the Egyptians dead, the Amalekites dead, the Assyrians dead, the Hittites dead, the Jebusites dead. They wanted everyone else dead, and they wanted to survive because it was a tribal religion. And it was a tribal religion when the story of Jesus Christ was still pretty much a tribal religion, but there's a lot of Roman propaganda in there. So the Muslims have a point, which is that Paul did change the religion from the four Gospels. I'll agree with that. But Muhammad changed the religion too. And Joseph Smith changed the religion. So Joseph Smith invented a fake Jesus. Okay? It's fine. If you're a Mormon, have at it. It's not... Follow religion according to what you believe is true. Okay? But Joseph Smith invented a fake Jesus story. Muhammad invented a fake Jesus story. Paul invented a fake Jesus story. They all did. The original Jesus story is the four Gospels. There is no other Jesus story. That's it. It's the four Gospels. It's not all these other things and Jesus was really married and blah, 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 blah. No, it's not. It's just the four Gospels. That's the original. Why? Because they wrote that book for a reason. And Jesus was not a real person. It's an allegory. So no, he didn't really marry Mary Magdalene, and they didn't have kids. And you know what I mean? That whole thing about, going into France and the descendants of Jesus, that's all fake. And the story of Muhammad's version of Jesus, that he didn't really die on the cross, and that was a fake Jesus, and that they knew the real Jesus, that's all fake too. And Joseph Smith saying that there's this other Jesus and he came to America, that didn't happen. Okay? So there's a lot of fake Jesus stories. And generally, they came out of people that didn't like the original. They didn't like it for whatever reason. And you can like it or not like it, it's still the original. Okay? So let's say that the Muslims are right about everything. That the Bible sucks and they didn't do it right, it was all wrong. Fine. It's still the original. And your religion is actually just made up. Because yours is not the original. And that the God of the Israelites, which the Muslims say is the same God that they're worshiping, well, the God of the Israelites was invented by the Israelites. It's their God. They invented it in Egypt. It's God according to the Israelites. It's God according to the Israelites. They defined what they meant by God. They created a tribal God for themselves. I'm not an atheist. I'm not saying that there is no spiritual force creating the universe. There is. But there's a difference between mythos and logos, okay? Mythos is mythology. Logos is logical. It's actually what really the truth, what the truth is. So you have mythology and you have truth. How it really is versus the mythology. Sometimes mythologies impart truths. But the fact of the matter is, there's a difference between a myth and truth. And we're not going to go into that in this video, because that's not why I'm making it. I'm making this video because I've been arguing with Muslims. And they have basically their concept is that Christianity is all wrong, that they have the real Jesus, and that they have the real Muslim story, which is the real one God story that they got from the Israelites. Well, the Israelites invented that story. It was their story. And if you're not an Israelite, you're not part of it. Muhammad is not a prophet of the God of Israel. He never will be. Elijah was, Jeremiah was, all the characters in the Bible were. But guess who isn't? Muhammad. Why? Because he's an Arab. He's not part of it. It's not his religion. But he invented it, or whoever invented it, did so because there's something attractive about the religion. But there was this thing about, well, this is the religion of Israel. What about us? We're not Israelites. So let's make this other version that fixes this problem of us not being the originators. So a lot of people don't realize that the religion is simply an invention of man. And Islam is an invention of man also. All books are written by men. God is not what Islam says it is, and it's not actually what the Israelite books say it is either. God is the thought dimension. God is the dimension of thought. God is the creative. There's not like a creator of the universe. There's like, I can sit and dream up a future. That's my mind. It has space, it has energy, it has objects. And then we collectively agree with certain ideas, and those manifest as natural law. So natural law is collective agreement. So we're spirits. We're the spiritual dimension, and the physical universe is the physical, mechanical representation of thought, which appears around us. That's how it works. So you say, so that's why there is a creator, spirit force, God, eternal thing. That's what we're part of. And then the physical world is the manifestation. It's the three-dimensional image called the universe, which is collective. So I see it, you see it, we all see it. We all see it together. We all agree on it, and that's what we see because it's natural law. We all agree with natural law. So then it gets into this thing of, well, there's two minds. There's the mind called the physical world, which is based on natural law, which is agreement, natural agreement, and it manifests as space and energy around us. And then within that, we have our own desires for how things should be. But there's certain things we can't change because you have this like broader agreement of the universe is like the broader agreement, and then within that you have your personal will. But both of them actually are your ideas. But you can't necessarily change you're not going to change natural law because you have this solid idea of this persistent idea that the universe has to survive as it is. And within that, right, because you're in agreement with people around you about what is and what isn't. That's the universe. Within that, you have your goals and dreams and desires within that framework of the physical world. Do you understand? You have your ideas and desires within the framework of the physical world. But that framework of the physical world is collective agreement. So you have the collective agreement. That's the first idea, and then the second idea is your will. So the first idea would be the thing that you're not willing to change. That's how the world's created. That's how the universe is created. It's not created through a big bang. It's not created by an imaginary God. It's created by the real spiritual force, which is us, we. Now, I'm not saying that I am above these laws of nature, like I can just do whatever I want, like I can go out and do any kind of criminal activity because I'm God. I'm not saying that. I just told you. We all agree with the framework. The framework is the thing you can't violate. And if you do, you're going to die. And actually, that is the story of the Bible. That's the story of the Bible. Is that if you do evil, you're going to die. If you do righteousness, you're going to live. Why? Because we have a framework of reality. We have a framework we're working within, which is the physical world. So you have to work within that framework because that's the framework that we've all agreed to. And if you start thinking that you can just be, I'm God, I can just do whatever I want. No, that's not going to work out too good. You're going to end up dead. You can't just do whatever you want because there's other people. So you have to work within the framework of the agreement of natural law, which is the laws of the physical universe. Gravity is one of them. You can't just jump off a bridge or off of a tall building and think you're not going to die, because you will. Because we're dealing with a framework of reality. But that framework of reality is ultimately an idea. That's what I'm saying. So anyway, I guess I've had enough on this video. Thanks for listening.